Yeah, let's wait for a few more minutes, then we're going to start. All right, guys. So today we are going to where we were last time. Just give me a second. Let me pen my pen here. So far what we have covered here is we have covered the ACI hardware. Then we have covered the, I think, Epic CIMC and discovery. Then we have covered the fabric discovery. And now we are going to, we have also covered the ACI interface walkthrough. Okay. And where we were in the access policy. Access policies. So suppose, for example, let's discuss about the access policy. So our requirement is here. Our requirement is we have one Nexus device to, for example, let's take example, one or two Nexus 9K devices. In those Nexus 9K, these are the spine spine switch. These are the leaf switch. And here we have some hosts, some servers are connected over here. 2 servers, for example. Okay. One, we have here server 1, and which has around 10 gig interface and VLAN 100. This is the one server, and second server we have here. Yeah. So this is access port. I have access port, and here I have BPC port channel and trunk port. Okay, and this port requirement is this VLAN must be allowed for the 200 to 201. This is the basic requirement. This is server 2. Or you can say the virtual infra. This is our requirement. Could you please mute yourself, guys? This is our requirement. In order to complete or in order to implement your environment in this ACI environment, how are you going to do that? Because in legacy environment, if you have the one server connecting to the your leaf, how you configure that? You just simply go to the log into the switch and you can just configure that interface, right? But in ACI, that's totally different case. This is your legacy environment. In legacy environment, this is for example, you have the catalyst and catalyst switch on access 3K, 4K, 5K, anything, and you just want to configure that, connect to one physical interface. For example, 1/10. How you do that? This is the configuration, basic configuration we do on the interface level, right? This is the interface configuration speed. Just give me a second, guys. This is the interface configuration. This is the first thing is you SSH the device. Then you log into the device. You go to the configuration mode of the interface. Then you configure the speed, CDP, LLDP, these basics parameter, right? But in ACI, what you do? In ACI, in order to complete these 2 steps, you log in, then you go to the under the interface, then you configure these protocols. What you do in ACI, the compared to the legacy environment, the total concept and the approach will be totally 2 different things. Okay, the first thing is we have to create the separate policy group. Then we have to create the interface profile in order to select the interface. Then we have to select the switch profile in order to select the switch. It means if you have the in your environment in ACI, what you do here, you first configure your interface. First you configure your interface, then you apply that interface on the any switch as much as you want, which is missing in the legacy environment. Here what you do? If you want to configure the 1/10 interface on this switch 1, you log into switch 1, then you configure these interfaces, right? But in legacy environment, but in ACI environment, what you do, you just say that 1/10, this configuration will be associated to you. Now, this interface 1/10 either can be used here, here, or here. It means interface policy and interface profile and policy group is independent here. It means you do not need to create simply one profile, one interface for each switches, because in ACI SDN environment that could be the case. You have 1/10 interface, 1/10 interface here, and same configuration you want, basic parameters you want to use same everywhere, right? What you do, you simply just create the simple one profile and you apply on as much as as possible on the switches. If you want to apply same configuration, whatever you have created for 1/10 interface on the 10 different switches, you can apply that. So that's the flexibility you are getting in a ACI. You're just creating the simply one interface policy or profile, and you are applying that policy profile anywhere in the switches. So for example, here, what we are saying that I am going to create the one policy collection of policy group, which is policy group here, where we are going to have speed, CDP, LLDP, LACP, ETCs, and that policy we are going to that these features we are going to enable on this interface, and this interface I can apply on 101 switch, leave one switch, or leave two switches, or leave three switch, anywhere. It doesn't matter. Wherever is requirement, I can apply that. That kind of flexibility ACI provides you. Okay.
Vijay, if we have, for example, 2-3 different type of configuration on the interface level, like on some interface, I don't want CDP or LLDP, CDP or some speed change, then I need to create another policy.
Yes. So best recommended option is to identify. So while deploying your infrastructure, okay, while your infrastructure deploying your interface, so first thing is what you identify. How many type of servers you are going to have in your infrastructure, right?
Right.
First thing is access policy approach. Policy approach. The first thing is you determine that type of server. And the second is type of interface type. Okay, for example, you have two types of server. Access policy. In your environment, you have two types of policy. Let's say, okay, access policy and BPC interface, two interface. And now you want to change that access policy for each server? Answer is no. You want to maintain the consistency of the access policy in your environment. It means if anyone, doesn't matter you have 100 server or one server, you are going to use the same policy across your environment to make your environment to simplify your environment, right? Suppose, for example, you are saying that in access interface, I want to have the CDP, I want to have the LLDP, I want to have the speed, I want to have the STP setting. This is the access policy setting, right? In the BPC interface, what you want? You want to have the LACP, you want to have the trunk port method, you want to have the STP, you want to have the LLDP, you want to have the speed. So this feature, you need to identify that. You cannot simply say that, okay, I'm deploying this server, I will create the different policy. No, you just maintain the consistency of the access policy in your environment to make sure that you have the same. If any server you're deploying, even in the future, you do not need to create the access policy again and again, right? You can create, for example, three or four type of access policy. Suppose you have 4 types of server, right? One is your HP server you have, one is your streaming server you have, second is your virtual server, virtual infra. You have, for example, VPN servers you have. So these 3-4 types of policy you create, and because if you are deploying the HP server, you will not deploy one simple HP server to any in your infrastructure, right? You might get that 10, 20, 50 HP servers. You might get that like hundreds of VPN servers in order to onboard in your ACI infrastructure. So just create the one policy and apply the same policy, all the requirements of the particular server. Okay. So for example, so just give me a second. Yeah, here. So in the this is the basic things. Okay. Interface, profile, and policy group. This is a basic thing. In the policy group, what you create here is you create the policy and you make the one group from the policy and you apply on this particular interface, right? Same thing, if you want to allow any VLAN on the interface, how we do that currently? We just log into the switch and bind that interface under the interfaces, bind that VLAN particular interfaces, right? This is our legacy way of doing that. But in ACI, you create the VLAN pool, then you apply the entire pool into the one VLAN policy, and based on your VLAN, based on your interface requirement, that interface choose the VLAN from the pool. Okay, so this is how overall looks like in legacy environment. You create this basic stuff, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 5 step of creating the your policy in the legacy environment. But in ACI, what you have here is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. This is the sequence of creating that. So
VLAN pool is basically this all this configuration, switch access, VLAN 100,
yeah,
generalized configuration. Okay.
yes.
And the
This is
domain, what domain is doing? Domain physical this?
yeah, domain. I will discuss that. Okay, no
Ach-
worries. Okay. So if I go here, okay, and this is your interface profile. This is, for example, your server connectivity. Let's take that. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is your switch. Okay, this is your switch, for example. You have one switch, and in that switch, you want to configure the one interface, 1/4 interface, for example. Okay, on 1/4 example 4 interface, what all the things you have to create? There are 4, 5 type of things you have to create before making that 1/4 interface usable for your infrastructure. The first thing is you have to create is VLAN pool. Then you have to create the domain. What is the VLAN pool? It's a pool, a collection of the VLANs. And there are two types of pool, if you remember that last time we discussed here. There is a two types of VLAN pool, static pool, dynamic pool. The static pool we use for the physical server deployment. Dynamic pool we use for the virtual server deployment. So let me walk through again. Okay. In ACI, how you create that? VLAN. In ACI, there are two types of VLAN pool, static and dynamic. Static VLAN pool, the use cases will be different for these, and dynamic. Where you create the static when you have the physical server and physical domain. Okay, here we have virtual domain. When you say the virtual domain, it can be your ESXi infra, or you can have the like any hypervisor. Okay, hypervisor wherever you want to deploy that. This is the two types of VLAN you have in the ACI. Okay, now this VLAN, you will not create this VLAN individually. While creating the VLAN, you have to specify that which VLAN is a static VLAN, which VLAN is your dynamic VLAN. Suppose, for example, you want to create the VLAN 100 to 1000 here. This is the VLAN range. Here you want to use that. Okay, here you want to use VLAN 1001 to 2001. If you see here, both the ranges does not is not saying that I am the dynamic and I'm the static, right? The major difference is whenever you will try to use this VLAN pool, you have to pick the VLAN manually to assign any interfaces. Okay, here in the dynamic pool, you do not pick the VLANs manually. Suppose, for example, you have these two deployment. This is the leaf. This is your server. The basic difference between the static pool and dynamic pool. And you cannot use dynamic pool anywhere. That's not, you can use dynamic pool anywhere, but based on the use cases, based on the best practices, you should be using that. Leaf 1, leaf 2. Okay, here we have virtual hypervisor. Here we have server. And here you want to use the VLAN 100. Simply what you have to do, you have to choose the VLAN, and for this leaf, for this server, you have to use this pool in order to use that. For here, you do not choose the VLAN. The ACI, if you have the virtual environment, ACI dynamically pick the VLAN from this range and it can assign your interface. It can, for example, assign 199. Okay, it can assign any random VLAN for you. This is the basic difference between the dynamic pool and static pool. Okay, so what is the second have? We have domain. How many types of domain we have? What is the domain here? Domain is to identify your type of services connecting to your devices, to your leaf or leaf devices. With how many types of connections you have, or what type of connection you have. Based on that, the reason for domain to specify that, because you are selecting the VLAN pool, right? How VLAN pool get to know that whether this is a physical server or virtual server? You have to tell this VLAN pool, right? In order to tell this VLAN pool, your server is virtual or physical, there are multiple types of VLAN domain available in the ACI. Domain. In ACI domain, you have 3-4 types of domain here. Here. First is a physical domain. This will be used in order if you have the server connected to your physical devices. A server, when I say the server, it can be your standalone server, it can be the your physical in any type of server, whether it's HP, Dell, doesn't matter. It's independent to the any vendors. Okay, then you have the layer 3 domain. When a layer 3 domain, it means router connected to your devices. Then you have the layer 2 domain. When I say the layer 2 domain, it can be your legacy switches. Layer 2 domain and physical domain both work in the same way. Okay, do not get confused. Then we have fiber domain. Fiber domain means when you have the storage area network, SAN network. When you have any storage connecting to your devices, for example, iSCSI you are using, NetApp server you are using, those kind of services you can connect to your leaf switches. And whenever you connect those server type of servers in the ACI, you have to use this particular domain. You cannot use physical domain for those SAN connectivity. Now, what you do here is which VLAN we should be using in the which domain here, which VLAN pool we should be using in a which domain here. That's a major part here. Okay, here we have VMM domain. Okay, when I say the VMM domain, is the virtual domain. Any type of virtual environment, whenever you connect with the ACI, you connect under the virtual domain. So if I map that correctly, if I map this, here. So this static pool be assigned under this physical domain. Static pool you can use for the layer 3 domain. Static pool you can use under the legacy layer 2 domain. Then dynamic pool you have to use the dynamic pool you have to use under the VMM domain only. It's not recommended to use dynamic pool under the static or physical or layer 3 domain. Okay. Then what we have to do? We have to create one container. What type of container we have to use? We have to use one container to associate these physical stuff or physical VLAN pool into the any interface. You need to have the one container. We call that AAEP. Okay, we call that AAEP here. Attachable access AAEP. This AAEP will be associating all the domains here. Then this AAEP will have the interface detail. This AAEP know that interface is, for example, if any interface, if you have this interface, right? This interface 1/4 interface. If 1/4 interface want to use VLAN 100, if one packet come on the switch here on the interface 1/4, say that I want to use VLAN 100 tagging, then your traffic will directly hit on the AAEP. On the AAEP, your domain will be checked. Where in the domain, what it will check that? It will check that do you have 100 domain, 100 VLAN. Whichever domain has 100 VLAN, that domain will forward your packet. Suppose, for example, this domain saying that to AP, I have VLAN 100 detail. Send your packet to me. I will forward your packet to the appropriate pool. Then from pool, I will check that whether VLAN is available for traffic or not. Okay, till here, this is the basic one. This is to set up that VLAN pool allocation. It had nothing to do with the policy. We have not created any interface policy so far. It may look complicated, but this is you need to understand the step. Step 1, 2, 3. Step 3 is to associate your interface, this interface, into the pool. You need to have the one path here. Suppose you have the multiple domains, right? And multiple VLAN pools. To simplify your multiple VLANs and multiple domains, you create the AAP. AAP is a container which has all the details of the VLAN pool and domain, as well as the detail of the interfaces. So this is kind of hub. You create that. Okay. Then come to the policy here now. So before going for anywhere, let me open my lab and show this. I have this lab. Let me log in. Just give me a second. Let me.
What is the actual purpose of doing all this exercise? Like we have one group and then pool and then the AEP. So traffic flow will be how the traffic, when the traffic comes to the interface, then how it will be decided, like
based
what
on
comes
the
first?
I will map that. Okay, no worries. This is just to give you that what type of things you can create it. I will map end to end how it works with the flow. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Okay. So where you create the access policy, tab is a fabric, then access policy. If you see that in the fabric, you have access policy, fabric policy, inventory. Under the access policy, you have called the pool and the physical domain and the policy. These are the three tabs under that which you will create these three policy. Under the VLAN pool, if you see that under the pool, you have various type of pools. VLAN pool, vSAN pools, and VXLAN pool, and the multicast pool. Here, in the VLAN, under the VLAN pool, I will see that under the pool, you have the multiple types of the pool available. So we will focus on the VLAN for now. Under the VLAN, you will create that, right click and create. While creating that, if you see the dynamic allocation and the static allocation, the moment you will say static, this becomes the static pool. With the moment you will say the dynamic, it becomes the dynamic pool. Okay. So for example, I will say that static test pool. Then I will get static. I want to create, and I can create the range. Either you can, if you want to create one VLAN, you can say VLAN 100 and VLAN 100. Okay. If you want to create range of the VLAN, you can say VLAN 100 to VLAN 1000. And inherit you allocation mode means you simply say that whatever is VLAN mode is, just keep that primary mode in the allocation mode also. If you see here, allocation mode is static. I'm saying that inherit means whatever is available in the parent, keep replicate here. Can you change that? Answer is yes, you can change that. So let me show that. If I create this pool, you see here, submit it. If I want to create dynamic pool, simply go here, dynamic pool. I will say that it is dynamic pool. Then I will say that here I want to, here one option you will see you are getting here. If you, for example, here in the static pool, the dynamic allocation option was grayed out, right? But in a dynamic pool, you are you see here dynamic allocation, inherit, and static allocation. It means even the dynamic pool, if you want to use the statically allocated, you can manually set that static allocation. It means your ACI will not select the random VLAN from this pool and assign to any host. You have to choose the a VLAN from the pool to allocate that, just like the static. It means mode is dynamic, but your VLAN's allocation, you are not depending on the ACI behavior. You are manually assign that VLAN based on your requirement. Okay, for the advantage of is here is, for example, you have one VMA, and that VMA previously was using VLAN 1999, and due to some issue, your entire virtual environment rebooted. In this case, the next time ACI can give the random new VLAN for you. It's not necessary. So from the dynamic pool, you will get the same VLAN. So its best option is to set that static allocation for the dynamic pool.
Can we say that basically static under the dynamic means reserved range from the defined pool? Basically, the static means the reserved pools which can't be used, right? And dynamic means unreserved pool, and from that also user has given a choice which VLAN ID they want to assign, right?
You can say that, yeah. This is the user defined, and this is the reserve for the virtual environment. So ACI can choose that what VLAN it want to use that.
And here it is giving an option that even if you want to choose from this pool, you can choose.
Yes.
That's a static.
Yep. Okay. Now, once you create the pool, if you see that the domain creation, if you see the domain creation, you will see the external domain, fiber domain, layer 3 domain, and the physical domain. This is your layer 3 domain for routing. This is your SAN network, storage network. This is your, this is your layer 2 domain. This is your layer 3 domain. This is your physical domain for any server connectivity. So by default, one physical domain will be automatically created inside the ACI. If you see the one physical domain is already created. If you want to use default physical created domain, you can definitely use that. It's not a big deal. If you say the physical domain, then I will say that you will see the two option is available coming here. AAP option and VLAN pool option. AAE option is showing because AAE option we have not created so far. This policy we have not created so far, right? We have created only VLAN pool. Now we are creating the domain. Then this domain will be associating with the VLAN pool as well as the AAP. So I will say that I will just create the VLAN static. For now, I do not have AAP. I will create it later AAP. Done. If you want to create the layer 3 domain, you can just simply say that create layer 3 domain. L3 domain. Then allocate the VLAN pool. Okay. So just to make sure that the VLAN pool is not the regular thing which you create that. This is a one-time configuration which you create for the ACI. When you set up the ACI, you create the pool. Unless until you have your pool is exhausted, you do not create this pool and domain again and again for each deployment. Suppose you have ACI which is up and running in your infrastructure, you just simply create the interface policies. That's it, access policies. You do not create the VLAN pool, domain, and AAP. These are the just one-time configuration. If you have this range of the VLAN. Now, if you want to use the 3001 VLAN, your VLAN pool, existing VLAN pool is exhausted or already used. In this case, you do not do anything. You just simply add one simple VLAN ID in under the same static pool. You do not create the new pools for the ACI. If you're creating the new pool of the ACI, you have to create that new domain. Then you have to associate that domain under the AAP. Again, same thing you have to do from scratch. So it's the best option is whenever you have the new VLAN requirement. For example, your VLAN, your current VLAN pool is already in used. You want to allocate the new VLAN. Simply go under the same pool. You just add the another VLAN. 3001, for example, my case. Simply. Same thing you can do under the dynamic pool also. So just to make sure that this is the one-time thing. It's not the always which you always will be doing that. If I click on this domain, you will see that this saying that this domain is associated with this pool. So the moment you increase the number of the VLAN, suppose you are adding the 3001, this 3001 will be available to use under this domain. Wherever you will use this domain, you will get that option 3001, you can use that.
The pools are already mapped to the domain.
Yes. Okay. Once you've done this two stuff, then you have the AAP. AAPs come under the global policy. If you see that.
Just one thing, one doubt. For example, you said 3001 VLAN, right? And I want to use that VLAN. My server is virtual, or maybe some legacy device. I want to call it under a different domain. Then how to be done?
Means
You said the pools are already mapped to the domain, right?
Yeah.
This particular pool is already defined under the physical. This pool is already defined under the L2 domain. So if I want to change the domain,
okay. So there is a two thing. You can use the same pool for multiple domain. Okay.
Okay.
If you see here, static pool I'm using for physical also, layer 3 also, layer 2 also.
Okay, that is possible.
That is possible, but that is not recommended things. Okay. Recommended option is you have the one pool with the one domain. That is the best practices, but 80% of the customer use this design because of the brownfield and greenfield integration.
Okay, and that suffices the requirement.
Sorry.
That is sufficient for them. That take care of all the requirements.
Yes. Yes. So both deployment is possible. It's not like you just have the 10 domain, you create the 10 types of VLAN pool. No, you just create the one pool Because in your domain, how many VLAN you want to use? VLAN 1 to 4,000, right? For
Yeah.
4,000, you should not creating the 4,000 pools for each individual requirement, right? You just create the one pool, and you tell the all this domain, you know what, your domain, you just pick the a range from here until unless you have the specific requirement. It means this domain I want to use just VLAN 1,000, 100 to 1,000, right? And this domain I want to use just specific to 200 to 2,000. This kind of, until unless you have this kind of requirement, you should not be creating the separate VLAN pool. If you have this kind of requirement, like each domain, I want to have the certain VLAN range. I do not want to utilize from the same pool.
Right.
In this scale, you create the one-to-one mapping. It means one VLAN pool to one VLAN, one domain association.
Fine. So
Just
same VLAN
like this one.
can be mapped to the different domains.
Yes.
That's not an issue.
Yep. If you see here, if we have here, this is based on the best practices. For example, I have VLAN 100 here. I have VLAN 200 here. This is the physical domain requirement. This is your layer 3 requirement.
Right.
Okay. You can segregate that. But if you do not have that kind of setup, you do not want to have, you can just have single VLAN pool, right? Say the VLAN pool X, for example, and you have 1 to 4,000 VLAN. And you can tell this domain, you know what, utilize from the same pool. It shouldn't be the issue. But make sure that you do not use the same, you use that one VLAN in ACI one time, not multiple times. Okay. To avoid any kind of
duplicacy is not possible. I can't use same VLAN for both the domains.
You can use that, but in ACI, what happens is when you create the one VLAN, ACI assign the VXLAN ID for one VLAN. And that VXLAN ID will be the same for entire fabric. If you are using the same VLAN, same VLAN in a different switches, and VXLAN ID going to be the same here. If in case anything, your switch reload happen or anything happen, if VXLAN ID change for the same VLAN, then you will have the intermittent issue, which was the available in generation 1 and generation 2 of the switches. That's why overlapping VLAN uses is not recommended in the ACI, which I will come to the point where we should be designing that part, a particular part.
Okay. So my question was that how AEP decide that this traffic belongs to,
based on the tag value. So if suppose if your traffic is coming to from server to here on the interface, if you have VLAN 100 allowed,
right?
On the VLAN 100 allowed, then VLAN 100 request will go to the AEP, right? It will not go for the VLAN 1000 request. Then in the VLAN 1 request, AEP will ask that this domain, do you have VLAN 100 access? And before even asking that kind of question, AEP will get to know that VLAN 100 is coming from which domain, because that association is also available somewhere else.
Right.
Okay, which I don't worry about that mapping. Okay, just understand this flow. I will explain that how the tag value and flow happens here. Don't worry about that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, you have so far you have understood this one, right? Just let's go one by one. Do not jump from here to anywhere. Once you done this, we have the AEP creation. Under the policy, you have the AEP, which is by default is available, one default AEP. Can we use AEP default? Answer is yes, you can use that. But the recommended option is to create the new AEP. And is also recommended is do not create the multiple AEP. Create one AEP and associate to all the domain. How many domains you have? Whether you have physical domain or virtual domain. If I say here, layer 3 domain also I want to use, and physical domain I want to use. If you see here, the moment I associate these domains under the AEP, you will see here this is encapsulation. If any traffic coming for this domain, AEP will say that go for this VLAN pool, right? If any traffic coming from this domain, AAP will say go for this particular pool, which is available. I am using the same VLAN pool right here for both the domain here. That's why I say that create that separate pool for the separate domain if you want to make sure that you have the uniqueness in your infrastructure, or you want to simplify your operation things here. Okay. So once you click here and finish, this VLAN pool or this AIP will be automatically associated to this pool. If you go under this domain, expand this. Now, if you see AIP, that automatically came here, right? The moment I associated domain under the AIP. Once you're done here, this part is done. Part 1 is done. Part 2 is done. Part 3 is done. Now, let's come to the interface configuration. Let's come to the interface configuration. Now, this is your switch. I have two requirements. Okay. I have VLAN pool is already available. Domain is already available to me. I have leaf 1. Leaf 2. This one. I have port channel requirement. This, and I have this access port. Access port requirement, I have BPC requirement. I hope you guys know that BPC. Okay, now the requirement is here is I need two types of policy. So here, what I have here is this is a policy. I have this policy. Under the policy, what type of policy I have? I have multiple bunch of policies available for the interfaces. When I say the policy is a protocol, layer 2 protocol is available. If I go to the under the interface and I copy paste this. Here, these are the policy. I have around 30-40 policy, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So if I go here and paste this policy, this is the policy I have available. Now, using this policy, I want to create the two policy group. It means I want to create the policy for the one group. I will say that, you know what, I want to create one group. We call that access policies group. Then I will create that one policy group. We call that BPC policy group. It means I will say that under this policy, I will associate the few policy and make that one group using that CDP, layer 2 interface, and speed link label. Then I will say that, yeah, these are the three policy, for example. For BPC, I want to use again, this policy. Again, I want to create this LLDP policy for here. I want to create the interface policy. I want to create the link global, link speed policy. So using the policy, I will create the separate policy group. Then this policy group, I will apply for the interfaces. It means you create the one time this collection of policy group. You do not create the multiple times. Now, once you have the policy, it means if this interface 1/10 interface, for example, want to use the specific policy. Suppose, for example, this 1/10 interface has the requirement of the CDP, requirement of the 10 gig, requirement of the, for example, layer 2 settings, which is the STP requirement of the, this is 3 requirement I have. In this case, I will not go to the anywhere, what I will say here, I already have the policy. I will create this policy. I do not need to create the policy. I will use simply this policy group, which already has the all the sort of policies available. If I go to the BPC interface, for example, I have 1/5 interface here. 1/5 interface. And this is the BPC interface. And this requirement is I need to have the LLDP. I need to have the speed. I need to have the STP enable for this one, for example. What I will do here is I will associate these policies under the one group. So this is a one-time configuration. If suppose you have now this, you have the 100 switches. You have the 100 switches, right? On the 100 switches, you have the interfaces where you need this type of settings. Where you need this type of setting, what do? You will not create the policy again and again. You will use this policy group under those interfaces. The moment you will use this policy under the interfaces, those interfaces will be automatically say that, okay, these are the protocols which is allowed for me. If I associate this policy to here, it means I'm telling this interface you have these three settings, these three access layer 2 settings. Access policy just nothing is a layer 2 setting for the interfaces. Okay, access policy is nothing is a layer 2 protocol settings. It means we are telling these interfaces you have these layer 2 parameters. Okay, by default in the legacy environment, when you bring the one interfaces, what parameters by default you get? By default you get the auto negotiation, right, on the interface, on and off, whatever, based on the switches. Then you get the by default VLAN once here is available. By default everything is set up. You just plug the one server, the server will be automatically associated with the one VLAN, right? But in ACI the concept is totally different thing. In by default in the legacy environment, you have the also CDP LLDP enabled, right? CDP for Cisco devices, LLDP for the non-Cisco devices. These two protocol will be by default enabled, right? But here in ACI, that setting is by default disabled. Everything is disabled in ACI. When you're purchasing one box, that box interface has none configuration. It means 0 parameter will be enabled for these interfaces. For what? Due to the security reasons. Due to the security reasons, all the interfaces of the switches will have the 0 configuration. Even the parameters, you have to specify that. Without these parameters, if you are trying to connect one server, this server or this interface, you cannot utilize in your ACI environment. That's why we call that ACI does support the whitelist model. It means ACI by default deny any implicit deny here happen. Okay, now if you want to use this is the policy group. If you want to use this policy to the interfaces, what you create here is you create the interface profile. Under the profile, you do not specify the switches. You do not specify the switches. Suppose you have the one, so you want to maintain the consistency of the access policy. You will say that, you know what, any switches which has 1/10 interface will have this kind of settings. And this 1/10 is reserved for the specific use for me. For example, if you want to say that 1/5 interface of all the switches, whatever you have in your infrastructure, are reserved for the specific connectivity. And that connectivity can be a virtual, whatever server type you have. So for example, I will say that, you know what, I have 1/10 interface, which want to use this access policy. I have 1/5 interface, which want to use this BPC policy. When I say the BPC policy, it means both the side, both the side must have the same interface. If I'm selecting the 1/5 on the switch 1, also we should be selecting 1/5 on the switch 2 also. Interface profile means nothing is an interface selector. It means we are selecting the interfaces for these policies. You will associate like this. Okay. Now, if you want to have a different interface also, for example, you want to create that separate interface. 1/15, 11, for example, and you want to use that. Now, second requirement is if you have a specific requirement. The specific requirement here says that, you know what, I want to use the specific settings for my, I will again say that this is access policy, but in this case, I don't want to use the CDP 10 gig and layer 2. What you can create here is you can create one more access policy. You can say that this is for 40 gig, 25 gig servers. And it will have the LLDP, it will have the auto negotiation of, for example, and you can have STP, you can have the, different settings for this. Same thing, if you have the 40 gig interface in your environment, if you have the 50 gig interface or 100 gig interface requirement, you can create the one same policy. If you have this BPC, and this BPC, you're giving the speed as a, for example, 40 gig, and you have the 100 gig requirement of the policy, right? You can just simply create another policy group and associate that policy to somewhere, some other interfaces. For example, you want to create this policy for a specific interface. For example, 1/1 interface or 2 interface. And till now, you are not specifying that this policy we are creating for which switches. We are saying that, you know what, this policy we are creating for any switches which are going to use these interfaces. If we associate this policy to any switches, that switch will have the same sort of policy. It means, suppose if I'm using 1/2 interface on any switches with this policy group, that switch and that interface will have the same policy, whatever I have associated here. Now come to the second part where we have the switch profile. Under the switch profile, what you do? This is the interface selector, okay? Let me interface selector. Here we have the switch selector. Under the switch selector, you select the switches. For example, you have the 2 switches. 1/1, 1/2 switch. 101, 102. And on this 2 switch, let's create that multiple interfaces. Okay. This is, for example, one interface. This is second interface, which I have this one. And this is third interface, which has this profile. So for example, this is a 1/5. 1/5. This can be your 1/2 interface on one switch, and this can be your 1/10 interface on another switch. The moment you will associate these interface profiles under these switches will say that, okay, you know what, on this switch, if I have 1/5 interface and that 1/5 interface is using this policy group, it means this interface will have this layer 2 parameters for me, and I'm going to allow the specific parameter to be enabled on this interface, on this switch. If you have another switches, for example, if you have the 1/3 switch and you want to use the same policy group and interface profile. So its best option is what you do here is, this is the basic one. So best option is what you do, you create the interface profile based on the switches. You do not create the interface profile and select anywhere. So as per the recommended design here is what you do, you create the interface profile for the specific switches. For example, I want to create the interface profile for 101 switch. And on 101 switch, what I will do here is I will create the interfaces 1 to 32. For example, on this switch, this much port is available. Port number 1 to 32. I will create the specific policy for each ports. And then I will associate this profile under my switch profile. Switch profile. Okay. So we should not be creating that interface profile random. We should be creating the interface profile based on your switches requirement. Okay. So suppose, for example, just give me a second. Let me delete all this and here recreate that. Suppose, for example, in your environment, you have the 4 switches. You have the 4 switch. So what you will create? You will create the 4 type of interface profile. Switch 1, switch 2. Just give me a second. Switch 3, switch 4. For example, what you will create here? You will create the 4 interface profile. Interface profile for leaf 101. Interface profile for leaf 102. Interface profile for leaf 101 and 102. And interface profile for 103. Now, this is how you design your interface profile. What you are doing here is, so what we are saying here is, just give me a second. Yeah. If I go to the interface, I'm going to say that I have 2 switches, 3 switches. Switch 1, 2, switch 3. I have leaf 101, and I will say the leaf 102, and I will say that 103. Now, if you see here, this all the access policy. Access policy means each switch's interface is going to be totally different. So what I will say here is this profile will be associated to here. This 102 will associate to here. Then this profile 101, 102 will associate to the both the switches. Why is that so? We have 2 types of interfaces. One is a access policy interface. Second is a BPC interface. It means all the BPC policy will be associating to this interface profile, and all the access policy will be associating to this profile. This is how you map that.
Vijay, just one query. We are saying basically we created 2 policy, access policy and the VPC policy. That is the predefined configuration which we want on all the interfaces. Then we go for an interface profile where we'll be calling all the similar ports where we want the same kind of policy. Am I right?
Yep.
And then
so there is a 2 types of interface profile you can design here. Okay, one is the independent. It means 1/10 you can use anywhere. Okay, on any switch. But the best option is you create the interface profile based on the switches. Okay, suppose if you have 4 switches, 3 switches, you just create the 3 types of the interface profile, and you're going to say that, you know what, under this profile, I'm going to use only this switch interface. Okay, if any, for example, you have 1/10 interface.
Okay.
Right, on 1/10 interface, if any profile or anything you want to use on this 1/10 interface, you make sure that policy group associated to the 1/10 will be only used for this switch, not for anywhere else.
Okay.
So this is the switch dependent interface profile, not independent. Okay, we are saying that forcefully these switches, you know what, anything related to these between 1/31, 32 interfaces, whatever you want. Suppose this is 1/2 interface. On 1/2 interface, if you want to use on this switch, make sure that 1/2 is using the access policy with the right interface profile. I do not want to use this interface on any other switch. I do not want to use this access policy on any other switches.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
you can say that you can associate. So access policy group is independent. Okay, just to make sure that policy groups are independent here. These are independent here. We are saying that we are going to create the dependent interface profile for each switches. So whatever policy is available here under this profile, make sure that that profile must be only available for one switch, not for anywhere else.
Got
Okay.
it.
However, if you are creating the non-independent profile, saying that, you know what, I'm just creating the interface 1/4. That 1/4 you can use anywhere, right? Here. It's not a big deal.
Hmm.
Here we are saying that, you know what, I do not want to create independent things. I want to make sure that everything is mapped correctly. Now, in future, if you're introducing 104 switch, right? You can use the same policy group. You do not need to create any new policy group. You just have to create the new interface profile and new switch profile. That's it. And you can use, suppose, for example, once on this switch, 104 switch, I want to have 1/15 interface with this requirement. You can simply say that on the interface profile 1/15. And the moment you will say 1/15 under this profile, and this profile you will associate with only switches where you want to use this policy. If I associate this interface profile to this switch,
Hmm.
so whatever is available for under this profile, I have 1/10 interface, 1/11 interface, 1/12 interface, right? So all these three interfaces will be available here with the access policy, whatever is available. So that's the reason we should be creating that independent dependent interface profile for the switches. It means make sure that whatever switches you have, you
Hmm.
create the one interface profile telling that, you know what, under this or for these switches, if you want to use 1/1 interface, you create that 1/1 interface profile or the policy under this interface profile. If anything is 1/1 under this, if any interfaces which is going to be available under this 1/1,
Hmm.
we are going to use for only one switch, not more than one switch. It's just like association. We are creating that association with it.
So is it like that? For example, I am defining that in all my switches, first four ports, 1, 2, 3, 4, will be having a same access policy, and irrespective of whichever switch I am using. So I have created an interface profile and map those four interfaces, and then in the switch profile I define, and then the same thing follows on all the switches, or wherever
Yeah.
the
So
profile is.
yeah. So that's two things. First thing is when
I'm sorry,
we
I'm
started.
getting little confused
Yeah.
in this.
Yeah. Just give me a second. You have two types of interface profile. Okay.
Hmm.
Interface profile is what? Interface selector, where you use the which policy group will use for which which interfaces, irrespective of the switches.
Switches, right?
Okay. But here what we are saying here is here concept is same.
Hmm.
Concept going to be the same. But here we are saying that, you know what, this profile I want to dedicate for one switch. So whatever is available under this profile, make sure that is only applicable for these switches, not for anywhere.
Okay, okay.
Okay. We are
It's
not
limited
saying
to one
that.
thing.
Exactly. We are just limiting that interface uses for specific switches here.
Got it.
Okay. For example, under this interface profile, I have 1 to 10 interface available. That 1 to 10 interface, I want to use only on these switches with the specific profile or access policy group.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay. But you also have the flexibility. For example, if you want to use VLAN 20 to 30, and you do not want to be with the specific switches, right? You can
Hmm.
create one access interface profile and you can use that profile anywhere on the switches.
Okay. So profile can be switch dependent, or it can be a
It's
independent
independent
on
interface.
multiple. interface we
yeah,
can use.
interface profiles are independent. Okay, you just have to make that association to make sure that those profiles are now, dependent on a specific interfaces or specific switches.
So, sir, what is the use of what is switch profile exactly?
Switch
Interface
profile
profile
is
I
a
understood.
switch selector. On which particular switch selector.
Hmm.
Here you know that 1/10 interface will use this policy group, right? Till
Right.
here.
Right.
But you need to also say that on which switch 1/10 interface. I will say that on this switch 1/10 interface. Right?
Okay. Right.
Then here I will say that 1/5 interface here and 1/5 interface here. That's the reason if you see here, I have associated the two interface profile on these switches. One is for access policy, independent, right?
Hmm.
Second is same policy interface profile I'm using on both the switches. It means this is for access policy, this is for the BPC.
Hmm.
If these two switches are running the BPC and you want to use any interface 1/5, you just make sure to not create the separate profile. Any BPC interface will be always coming through the specific profile to me.
Okay.
Okay, we are telling these switches, if you have anything related to the BPC configuration, make sure they are coming through the specific profile, interface profile.
Okay.
Okay,
But
and
this thing
map to
is
it.
limited to BPC only because this interface which you are just now mentioning under the switch leave 101 1/10 or 1/5.
Mhm.
This thing we have already defined in the interface profile, right? So,
Yes, you have defined under the interface profile, but under the interface profile, you are saying that only the directly one single access interface will be coming through a specific interface will be coming through here, and they are
right.
not. So one interface profile is not associating with both the switches. If you see here, they are dedicated for specific switches for access policy only. Here we are saying that, you know what, if 1/5 I'm choosing here with the BPC setting, make sure that 1/5 is replicated on both the switches. But if here we are saying that if I select 1/10 interface, this 1/10 interface will be selecting only on a specific switch, not both the switches.
Mhm.
If you have to select 1/10 again on this profile in order to use the access policy here.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
Okay, sir.
if I go to the here, if you see here, we have the policy, and let's map one more thing here. Now, how you map that, the physical domain, VLAN pool, everything, right? Because there must be some mapping. Here we have created first pool, right? And that pool we map to the physical domain, right? For example, physical domain. Now, this physical domain we map to the AAP, right?
Right, sir.
AAP. Now, how you map this entire access policy? Here we have VLAN pool, VLAN 100 to 1000. Okay, here we have physical domain, for example. Now, what you do here is you just, wherever you feel this interface will belongs to the physical domain or to the routed domain. You use based on that particular thing. Okay, so you will see that AAP I want to use here, here, and here. Now this AAP know that all the details of the physical and the VLAN pools. This is how you associate that. You do not associate AAP anywhere else. You associate this AAP under the access policy group. You see the collection of policy. You are telling this interface, you have the permission to use this VLAN pool. You have the permission to use this domain on any switches. Wherever this policy group will be used, that switch will, I'm giving the permission to that switch. You have the permission to use this VLAN pool and this domain. Okay. Now, this is how you associate your access policy end to end. This looks might, complicated, because just to configure one single interface, we have to do a lot of things here. Okay. You have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps in order to configure the just interface. This is just a one-time configuration. In future, for example, in future, you want to use a 1/10 interface, for the 1/11 interface, 1/11 interface. Okay. What you will do, you will not create all this policy and policy group again and again, right? You will simply go under the interface profile, say that 1/11 interface, and associate the policy group whichever you want to use. Suppose this policy group, this policy group you want to use for this interface, you can use that. And that interface available on the 1/101 switch will use the same policy, whatever is available under this policy group.
Okay.
Okay. And so this is a one-time configuration. This is a one-time mapping. You do not create this interface profile, switch profile every time. You may get chance to create the VLAN edition. You will get chance for the access policy creation. You will get a chance for the access policy group creation. That's it. Once your deployment is completed, interface profile, switch profile, you do not touch that. You do not create the new domain and new VLAN pools also. And new AAP, you also do not create that.
Is it possible to apply two policies to a same interface at the same time?
We are doing here, right?
Okay.
If I suppose in future I bring that another 104 switch, we do not need to create the access policy group for that switch. We can use the same policy group.
No, my question was on one interface of the switch, can I apply two access policies?
No, you cannot do that.
No. Okay. So sometimes we see the issues like we have a policy applied on an interface which is defined. Now we are finding some kind of unexpected traffic, and we want to apply some one more condition to like strong control or something.
There is one thing. If we are trying to modify the entire policy group, okay, that policy group will be the policy group setting. If you're trying to modify, that modification will be reflecting to all the interface which are using this policy group.
Right.
Okay, so just to make sure that if you are planning to edit anything, you should be knowing that what all the interfaces in my ACI, because in ACI you can have the 100 switches, right? If 100 switches are using this access policy, it means all the 100 switches will be impacted due to your small changes. If you want to tweak any specific setting for a specific interface, just create the new policy group for a specific purpose. Do not modify the existing policy group, because till you understand the policy group or modify that, the entire thing will be messed up.
Right. So best practice is actually to apply, configure a new access policy and replace on that particular interface.
Yes. If you want to have the specific settings or something like that. Suppose in future you want to enable the, currently you are using the 25 gig for 1/11 interface, right? And you suddenly want to use a 40 gig interface. You do not change the access policy group, existing access policy group. No, because this access policy group, for example, I'm using for this switch also, right? And here also I'm using that. If you change here anything, all the interface for here, 10 interfaces are using this policy group. All the 10 interfaces will have the impact.
Right. Actually, you see that sometimes the issue, we see the problems like we are finding some kind unexpected broadcast coming from particular server or something. So
yeah, so
apply some conditions policy.
Yeah, so make sure that you design. So as I said, you can design access policy based on your servers also, right? Because not all the servers send the broadcast traffic and all, right? You have the HP server, you have the Dell server. You can create the access policy group for the specific servers, right? Suppose, for
Right.
example, you can create that the HP policy group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Services. So wherever is, suppose these specific switches are using the HP servers, apply to that those interfaces only.
Right. Perfect.
Okay. So if I go to the switch now, just give me a second. Once you understand this policy, access policy, the ACI become easy part. Okay, ACI become the easy for troubleshooting for day-to-day operation, guys. This is the main thing, because 90% of the time you guys will be interacting with this kind of stuff. You do not get chance to deploy ACI every time. You get
Right.
you get the new requirement saying that I want to use the new server, and that new server want to connect with a specific leaf, a specific port. You do not create entire thing here. No, you just modify a few things and just make it up, right?
Right.
So if I go to the here, if I go to the fabric, I might need to register my switches. Just give me a second. Let me register it. 01, leave 1. Just allow me. So let's take 5-minute break. Meanwhile, I set up my lab. Okay.
Okay.
Just come back after what is time? So 4:52, 4:56.
Oh my God. It's too early for you.
Oh yeah, it's 3 a.m. for me. I'm in UK.
So you're setting a special alarms for our classes.
Oh yeah, I woke up around 3-4 times.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Okay, see you in 5 minutes. Guys, I'm back. Let me know if once guys back. Okay, guys, are you guys back or? Please let me know guys, if you guys back. You can start.
Yeah, we have.
Okay. So let's implement these things, whatever so far we have completed, right? Access policy. So I have two switches, leaf one, leaf two. On this two leaf switch, I have 1/10 interface, one on the one switch. And on the both the switches, I have 1/5 interface as a BPC interface, right? So let's create that. So VLAN pool, physical AAP is already created. What I will do here is I will create the VLAN policies. Then I will call this policy under the access policy group. Then those using that access policy group, we will create the interface profile. Then those interface profile I will call under the switch profile. Okay, so I don't know why my lab is slow. If I go to the policy, under the interface, you will see a lot of policies are here. By default, in a 5.2 section, 5.2, you will see that default policy. Okay, and in a default policy above than 5.2, you will see the two types of policy: CDP on, CDP off. Is always best option is to use that non-default policy. For example, if you want to use the CDP on. So if any policy anywhere you want to use CDP as a on, you can use CDP on. If anywhere you want to create CDP off, you want to disable CDP off, make sure that you use the CDP off policy. You always create the two policies for one protocol, on and off. Wherever you want to use on, you can use on. Wherever you want to use off, you can use the off. If I want to use the link label means speed. What speed you want to create? I want to create, for example, 10G. In a 10G speed, you want to create auto negotiation off, on. What you want? You want to give speed. Inherit means auto negotiation. I will say the auto negotiation off with the 10 gig interface. Okay, done. I want to create the same thing, 10 gig with the auto off. Off. It means any interface which has off auto negotiation off requirement, I will use this policy. Okay, then I will use the 25 gig interface, 25 gig. I will create the simple this policy here. And wherever, as per our use cases, I can use these policies. Okay, then I will create the port channel. In the port channel, what I want to use here? I want to create the LACP, right? LACP active. Then you will see that these are the settings you have available in the LACP settings. It's always the best option is to use this one. You can change the LACP mode. If you want to have the LACP port channel, if you want to have a static port channel, you can create this based on the requirement. Oh, I've given the wrong name. Then I will create that port channel on without LACP. Here is mode on. If anyone we want anywhere we do not want to use LACP, you can use the on mode here. Okay, then I will use the port security if you want to use. If you want to use that, that's
These all policies are already configured, which is showing in the left hand side.
no default policies are there. Okay, So
These link level flow, LLDP, MACsec, these are
nothing
pre-default.
nothing is configured. Nothing is configured. Okay. This policy you have to create it, and under this speed, this is the speed which ACI supports.
Okay. Maybe these categories are already defined. These the names which are like fiber channel interface, firewall, L2, link flap.
Yes,
Under that you are changing it,
these
right?
are the these are the protocol which are available for the interfaces.
Okay. So
ACI
this is
interfaces.
already
Yes.
available to use.
Yes. So whichever protocol you want to, whichever parameters you want to enable for interfaces, you can use from out of this. Okay. For example, you want to change spanning tree for any interfaces. You can create that. For example, BPDU filter, enable it. Right. And wherever you want to use this BPDU settings, you can use that under the group. So currently we are creating the policies. Okay. By default, there is one policy is already available, which we call the default policy. Okay. But we are creating the non-default policy for ourselves. If you see here, each policy has a default policy one. You can change this policy and you can use it also, right? But if you do not want to use the default policy, you can create the new policy. For example, LLDP. LLDP is already available here on mode, right? But what if you want to disable the LLDP? There is no policy for that, right? LLDP off. You can simply apply this policy. If you do not want to use any LLDP policy or any LLDP on any specific interface. Now, this is just a policy. Policy just nothing is a protocol, layer 2 protocol, which you want to use for creation of the policy group. So what is the access policy group? Nothing is a collection of the policies, right? In the policy group, what we are saying that we are calling the multiple policy which we have created, right? Then we will use this policy group to the interfaces. Now, once you've done this interface, go to the switches here under the If you see here, under the policy, we will create the policy. Here, under the interface, we will create under the leaf, you will create the policy group and profile. Then under the switch, here you will create the switch profile. So if you see here, two options are coming, leaf and spine. We do not want to create these settings for the spine. We want to create for the leaf switches, right? You will see that profile and policy group. Currently, if you see here in the policy group, you have bunch of policies group type, access port or port channel or BPC. Which policy group you want to create? I want to create one access policy group, right? As per my requirement, access policy group. Then I will say that this is for the server access policy group. Okay. Which attachable access profile you want to use? If you see that, this is asking which attachable access profile you want to use. That I have created one global policy group, attachable access profile, right? Here, if you drag and drop, you will see that whatever is available. And you can create from here also, okay? If you want to, if you do not have that. Then what link speed you want to use? 10 gig I want to use. Then if you see a bunch of settings are available here. Look here, whatever you want to use that. But if I'm saying that I just need simple LLDP mode on and 10 gig and CDP, I will say that off. That's it. This is the advanced setting. This is the basic settings you have. Four interface policies are the basic settings which you should be following that. The advanced setting means various type of protocols and things are available here. If you want to create the flap policy for any interface, you can create that. A lot of things are other things are available here. If you want to create the Storm policy, you can create here. Okay. Then I will say that submit. Simply means I have created one policy group, and in that policy group, these are the some protocol which I'm using that. Okay. Now I have created the one policy group, which is the access policy. Now I want to create the BPC policy group. How you create that? you do not create the BPC policy group under the access policy. Okay, there is a BPC interface. If you see, there are a lot of protocols are available here. If I right click and create the BPC policy group, I will say that I will create the BPC policy group for the servers. Then I will say that which attachable access profile, this one. CDP, I will say that on, I will keep that. Link speed, I will say that 25 gig. If you do not specify anything, it will select the inherit. Okay, so it's always best practice to specify the speed of the interface. Which protocol you want to use for this port channel? LACP active. Okay, then this policy I will avoid that. Then I will say the next. In the next, you will set the more protocols, MACsec, MCP, monitoring policy, lot of policies, HCP policies, storm control policy, lot of policies are available here. Okay, but for example, I'm not selecting all the policies. I have created the two policy group. Then I have created this one. I have created this one. Now, what I need to create here, I need to create the interface profile and map this policy under the interface profile. Now, if I go to the, if you see here, if you want to create a port channel without BPC, you have here option. Okay. 5-byte channel is for the SAN networking. For the profile, if you go to the profile, right click here, I will say that leave I will say 101 interface profile. This is how you give the name, just to make sure that. I will say that which interface on this leaf. I will say 1/1 interface I want to use. Which policy group you want to use? I want to use the access policy 1/10 interface. On the 1/10 interface, I want to use the access policy group which I have created. Okay, then I will say okay, submit. You will see here. Now, if you want to use any interface on the 101 switch, you just come here and specify here and use the policy group. For example, on 101 switch, I want to use the 1/2 interface, right? I will just add the 1/2 interface. 1/2. Now, which policy you want to use? I can say that again, same policy, non-access policy, want to use that. Look here. Now, if you want to create the BPC, this is the one interface. I will create the same leaf 102 interface profile. I will say that interface 1/10, for example. Which access policy? I want to use this access policy. Done. So I have leaf 1, leaf 2 for access policy. However, I want to create the BPC also. Okay. So I will say that interface 101 to 102 interface profile. It means whatever is interface is available on this interface, this profile, those interface will be the BPC interface. I will say the BPC. Look here, 3 profile I've created. Now this profile, once I've created this profile, it means I am saying that 1/5 interface using the BPC. It means this BPC, this port must be available on both the switches. Then 101 switch, I'm saying that these are the two ports I'm using as a direct connected to the server single interface. On this switch also just directly connected interface. They're not BPC. Now, once we create this, we have to come under the switch here. Under the switch, we come to the profile where we create the switch profile. In the switch profile, what I will say here is I will create the two types of profile. I will say that BPC profile and non-BPC profile. Okay, it means I will say that leaf 101 switch profile, and in this leaf I will select that single leaf ID 101. I will say the leaf ID is 101. Update.
Then next, on this interface, this switch, which profile you want to update that? I'm saying that, you know what, I want to update the access policy because this is the just single leaf. Then I will say the leaf 2. I will say the leaf 102 switch profile. Then I will select the switch. Which switch I want to use under this profile? I want to use this switch. Which profile? Access profile. Then I will create the BPC interface, BPC switch. I will say that leaf 101, 102 switch profile. Then I will say that 101, 102, just the name. I can select the both the switches. Whichever profile will be you want to use here, that will be replicating on the both the switches. Look here. What I said here, I created a, just give me a second. I created the independent profile. I say that this interface profile will map to the this switch. This interface profile map to the this switch. Sorry. This interface profile we will map to the this switch. However, this profile will match to the BPC pair. This is the BPC pair. You will see here. Individual for access policy. This is for the BPC. Now, how you get to know that whether BPC is created or not? Right? When you first time bring up the switches, how you get to know that whether switches are in a BPC or not? Go to the interface policy. You will see that policies. Under the policy, you will see that virtual port channel default. Here, if you see that currently there is no BPC configuration between the switches. You just simply say that BPC 1 and just give that BPC ID, for example, 100, and select that BPC pair, switch 1, switch 2. Then only your all the configuration will be up and running. If you see that virtual IP will be automatically assigned by the AP here. Okay.
So Vijay, does it matter in ACI that we need to go hierarchically? First we need to have a VPC, then only we can call it
Yes.
under some.
Yes. If you are configuring the BPC port here without
Yeah.
BPC pair configuration, you should not be calling them because those ports won't be coming up. Only single those ports will act as an access port. You know, it still doesn't matter whether you're creating the BPC policy or not.
Okay.
Okay. So if you see here, this is what so far this is what we have created. What we have created? We have created the pools. Okay. We have created the domains. Okay. We have created the AAP. Sorry. AAP we have created. Then we have created the policies. Then policy group we have created. Then profile we have created. Then we have created the switch profile. This is the access policy in creation. Now, this is current setup. For example, let's take example. This is your current company setup you have. In your environment, this is the current setup you have. Now, the new requirement came for you. Okay, let's create the new requirement for you. And I'm sure that 90% you are using that. If you check that your APIC in your environment, you will be using the switch profile and interface profile same way the way I'm using that. Right? Because I've been involved for your infrastructure, so I know that initial setup. So if you see here, now this is your new requirement saying that you got new server in your infrastructure, and these are the interfaces. Now they are ask you to create the one BPC interface. They're giving that, you know, you allocated 1/6 interface on the both the switches for this specific server. Okay, a specific server 1/6 interface, and you want to run the BPC. That's a one server requirement. And BPC, you want to use a VLAN 102. 102, for example. Just take that simple VLAN. Okay. Currently, if you see here, I have not specified any VLAN tagging for interface. I have just brought up the access policy. I have just established the physical connectivity, physical communication between the leaf and your server. I have not created any tagging for VLAN for in these interfaces. Okay, that's a separate configuration. Second requirement you have. This is the first requirement. How are you going to do that? This is the leaf 1. This is the leaf 2. Now, you want to use the same policy, right? For example, you want to use the same BPC policy. You do not want to use different policy for the BPC, right? So what you will do here is, in this case, this is a new server. What access policy you need to create? You do not need to touch the VLAN. First thing is you will check that whether you have the enough VLAN to give this server. You have enough, for example, right? You have the physical domain is already created. You do not need to touch that because this is a server. You already have the AAP associated to it. Now, the last thing you will have to create, you have to create the interface profile. You do not need to create the policy group because you already have the policy group for the BPC, right? Interfaces.
Right.
What you will do here is you will say that it's a access port or BPC port. You will say the BPC port. In a BPC port, which interface profile you will create that? This interface profile. Okay. If it is the access, let's create the BIP here. I will say that add interface. I will say that interface 6. I will say 1/6. Which policy group? BPC. That's it. This same policy group is associated with the profile also, right? So whatever I'm going to select here under the profile, it will be automatically replicating to the interface profile, switch profile. We do not need to create anything here. This is how simple it is. Now, the second requirement is you have the new requirements in the one server I want to connect here on this switch, and that switch interface is your 1/15. Now, you have the specific requirement. Here we're saying that broadcast storm control should be enabled, right? This is the new requirement. And this is your 40 gig interface. And your LLDP should be off. This is your basic requirement you have. Now, do we have this kind of access policy group? Answer is no, right? We do not have any access policy group which has this setting, 40 gig and the storm is enabled. Do you want to modify existing policy group? Answer is no. You should not be modifying the existing policy group for these settings. You will create the what? Access policy group. You will create that. Then you will create you will associate this policy group to the interface profile. Okay. Now, what I will do here is I will go to the policy group, and this is the access port, right? So I will say access port. Then I will say that I will say the 40 gig server, for example, HP. Okay. This is a specific. I will use the same attachable access profile. Link speed I can use. If do not have anything here, 40 gig we do not have, I can create from here also. Okay. I will say that 40 gig. I will select that interface 40 gig. Then LLDP should be off, CTP should be on. Now, what is the storm control here? Storm control currently is nothing is here. I can create the new storm control. I can say that is storm. Then I will say the all type unicast, per door unicast. Then I will say that 80%, what should be the 75%. Multicast packet should be the 80%, 75, 80%, 75. If anything reaches to the 75 or 80%, must be the packet should be dropped or interface must be shut down. Sorry.
I think it's the background.
Okay, so action should be drop or shut down. So I will say that just drop the packet, do not shut down the interface, otherwise it will be outage. What is saying that? Achha, okay. Okay, so this should be the 85. 85. Done. Once you create that storm control, this is what I wanted to give the setting, right? Submit. Who created the one more access policy group? Now I do not need to create any policy group interface profile because I already have the profile, right? I will, on which switch I want to attach that 1/2, right? I will say that 102 access policy, and I will add the one interface saying that interface 15. I will say 1/15. Which policy group I want to attach? I want to create the new one, right? This is 40. That's it. The moment you will attach here, it will automatically, this policy interface profile is already attached to the interface profile, switch profile, right? It will automatically sync all the configuration. New interface will be automatically triggered over here. Saying that I got the new interface request 1/15. Make sure that 1/15 had the same configuration which I want to, which has been requested.
Okay.
This is the how you do day-to-day operation. You do not create every day new things. Okay.
And is it so that if something is applied or something I want to modify, I need to deassociate again before making any changes?
No. So there is a one thing, as I said, suppose you already have this interface, 1/15 is interface, this policy is running. For example, this policy is running. Okay. 40 gig server HP. Now, how many interfaces these policies are running? This policy can be on this also, right? Here also.
Right.
But do not and never make any changes in a policy group until unless you are sure about that where is going to be impact in my environment. Okay. If you want, like for example, I could have changed the access policy, right? I could have enabled the storming on the interface in the existing access policy. Why I did not created that? Because I'm using this access policy here also and here also. If I change anything on this access policy group, it will be impacting on both the switches, which I don't want to do that, right?
It's possible, but it's not recommended. It's not best practice to do that, right?
Yeah, it's possible. You can modify that anyway. That's not a big deal. Here, come and add anything. But that settings will be replicate or apply to all the interface wherever this policy is being used.
Replication will be very huge.
Yeah. If you want to apply for a specific interface and this policy group is using on the 15 interfaces, then you're gonna have issue.
Right.
Right? Its best option is to create the new one to be a safer side in your infrastructure. Any confusion so far on this? I know this will be is a confusing for sure, but you need to do the practical for this. Okay.
Yeah, more lab will be better about this.
Yes. Without lab, and if you do not have lab, go and check that whatever we are discussing. Go and check your infrastructure. You must have the same set of policy, same set of access policy group. If you do not have the same set of policy group, which I am discussing here, it means you have the bad design in your ACI. Simple.
Vijay, do we have a lab exercise in this training?
No. So this I'm using the D Cloud because getting physical lab is tough. So you can book that D Cloud from your account. I think guys should have the Cisco D Cloud portal access from your company.
Is it chargeable or is it
No.
open to everyone?
It's open to everyone.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so far what we have done here is we have created the access policy. Now, this access policy, now second thing is this is the physical configuration we have done, right? What about the logical configuration? You have the one server and this server want to use one gateway inside the ACI, right? inside the ACI, the server want to use the gateway. And that gateway is, for example, 10.1.1.1. And this server, I want to use for VLAN 100, right? Did we specify anywhere VLAN 100? Answer is no. We have not specified anywhere so far. We have associated these things, but we have not specified anything to anywhere.
Correct.
Right? Now, our task is to design the logical configuration. This is the physical setup. So far, you have done well and good. What about the logical configuration? Who is going to do that? Okay. So let's go to the logical configuration. Before the logical configuration, let's understand the type of the leaf switches we have in the ACI. Okay, we have the 3-4 types of the leaf switches. This is not the specific to configuration. This is not specific to the any modification. Okay, this is just a given name which is easy to identify in your environment. We have the leaf switches which are connecting to the direct to the your host, your servers. We have border leaf switches, which is suppose you have the if you have the layer 2 extension or layer 3 routing protocol running on the any switches. Any external connectivity we have on the switch, we call the border leaf switch. Is there any specific changes happen? Answer is no. You can use the border leaf switch as a normal switch as well as the border leaf switch, but it's always best option is to dedicate that border leaf switch for the routing and for external connectivity. Then we have the service switches. Service switches are what? When you have the load balancer or firewall connecting to that switch, we call that service leaf switch. This is again specific to the terminology. It has nothing to do with any behavior of the switches. Then you have the compute leaf switches. Compute leaf switches means you have the switches which are dedicated only for the server connectivity or virtual environment connectivity. There is no layer 3 or external connectivity on those switches. Then we have the IP storage switches. So these storage switches are called whenever you use that fiber channel interface on the switches. These are the specific switches. If you want to use any storage or iSCSI or anything related to FCOE, you should be using that specific switch for that kind of traffic. That's why we call that IP storage switches. Okay, so we have around 5 types of the just terminology of the leaf switch. Now, can we use this service leaf switch as a compute leaf? Can we use this compute leaf as a service leaf switch? Answer is absolutely yes. You can use that. But its best option is when you have in your environment, when you are using the banking environment and fintech environment, I'm assuming you will have more than 100 leaf and spine switches, right? In this case, dedicate few leaf switches for the routing, few leaf switches for the server connectivity, few leaf switches for the different categories. So always divide your devices based on the categories to be more to build up robust and better design in your infrastructure. So anyone is coming with a new requirement, they know that where and which interface and which leaf switch they want to connect that, rather than jumping everywhere, connecting anything anywhere, right? It's always a best option is to dedicate that switches with the specific devices or a specific connectivity. Okay. Okay, guys, I will be stopping today here. From tomorrow, I will be discussing the logical setup of the ACI, where I will be discussing the tenant and all of the logical configuration. Physical configuration, we know that, right? How we should be bringing the physical connectivity. Now, how we are going to utilize this physical settings into the logical configuration, we will get to know that. How we should be tagging the VLAN, how we should be tagging the interface, and with the specific gateway, all these things we will get to know that tomorrow. Okay. Please, guys, if you have the lab something, even if you have the your environment, just check that whatever we have discussed so far today. That will be add benefit after the class. Sure. Okay, guys, then we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Vijay, will we be uploading this thing today or tomorrow?
I might upload today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good day.